I turned the key in the lock of my new apartment for the first time, the click of the latch echoing like a starting gun in the race of my new life. My hands trembled slightly as I pushed open the door, the smell of fresh paint and possibility wafting out to greet me. I stepped inside, the soft afternoon light spilling through the large windows and painting golden patterns on the hardwood floor. This was my space, my sanctuary, shaped by my choices and my desires alone. I wandered through the empty rooms, each step resonating with the promise of a fresh start. My mind replayed the last few years in flashes, my ex-husband's indifferent glances, the cold silences at dinner, the night I overheard him confess his feelings for someone else over the phone. I had been invisible in my own life, a ghost in my marriage. But not anymore. Here, surrounded by walls that asked nothing of me but to fill them with my own dreams, I felt a flicker of hope stir within me. I sat at my favorite corner in the local cafe the following week, my laptop open but my eyes watching the world outside the window. People passed by in a blur of motion and color, each absorbed in their own stories. I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me as I turned my attention back to my work. I was a freelance graphic designer now, my days dictated by creativity and client emails, not by the cold expectations of my past life. As I adjusted a color palette on my screen, I felt someone's presence beside me. I looked up to find a man with kind eyes and a tentative smile holding a coffee cup. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice a soft intrusion into my solitude. I hesitated, the walls I had built around myself since the divorce urging me to say no. But his gaze held none of the demands I had come to expect from interactions. There was just an open, honest curiosity. "Sure," I found myself saying, and he sat across from me, his presence surprisingly comfortable. Our conversations over coffee became a regular occurrence, each encounter slowly stitching color back into the fabric of my life. I learned that his name was Michael, and he was a writer, his passion for storytelling evident in the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about his work. My afternoons with Michael were a sharp contrast to my evenings alone at my apartment, where the silence often felt too heavy, too reminiscent of my previous life's isolation. One particular evening, as the cafe began to empty, Michael closed his laptop and turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've always believed that people come into our lives for a reason," he began, his voice threading through the hum of the remaining cafe patrons packing up. "And I think we might have stumbled into each other's lives at just the right moment." I looked at him, the vulnerability in his statement echoing my own internal battles. My heart had been closed for so long, sealed away behind layers of hurt and mistrust. But here was Michael, offering a glimpse of something different, something that spoke of new beginnings and healed wounds. "I think you might be right," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, surprised at my own willingness to admit it. The possibility of a new chapter, penned with laughter and understanding, suddenly seemed not just a distant dream, but a tangible, reachable reality. I sat across from him in the dimly lit coffee shop, where the soft hum of quiet conversations mingled with the occasional clink of cups. I watched as he leaned back, an amused smile playing at the corners of his lips, his eyes reflecting the warm glow of the hanging lights above us. "So, you're saying you're ready to jump back into the chaos of dating?" he asked, his tone teasing but underlined with a hint of curiosity. I laughed softly, feeling the warmth of the coffee cup seep through my fingers. "I think I'm more ready to explore something meaningful, something real. Not just dating for the sake of it," I confessed, feeling a blush heat my cheeks. The coffee shop, with its cozy corners and whispers of other people's secrets, suddenly felt like the perfect confessional. He nodded thoughtfully, swirling the dark liquid in his own cup before setting it down gently. "That makes two of us," he said, his voice lower now, intimate as if the space between us had shrunk. "I've done my share of aimless relationships. I'm looking for depth now, something substantial." I met his gaze, finding a sincere openness there that made my heart skip a beat. Was it possible he was looking for the same thing I was? The idea thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. "I think we might be looking for the same thing then," I whispered, daring to hope. The air around us felt charged, heavy with possibilities. I walked beside him through the crisp autumn air, our breaths visible in the soft evening light. We had left the coffee shop behind, opting for the quiet solitude of the nearby park. The leaves crunched under our feet, a symphony of reds, oranges, and yellows marking our path. I love this time of year, I said, watching a leaf spiral to the ground. There's something incredibly honest about autumn. It's beautiful, yet it doesn't try to hide the fact that everything is dying. He glanced at me, a smile tugging at his lips. I've never thought about it that way, but you're right. There's a raw beauty to its transparency. I found myself reveling in the ease of our conversation. It flowed naturally, meandering through topics and thoughts with the comfort of an old friendship. Yet, each word we exchanged, each shared smile, seemed to weave a tighter thread between us. Do you have a favorite memory from autumn? I asked, curious to dive deeper into his past, to understand the layers that made him who he was. He paused, looking up at the canopy of trees above us. When I was a kid, my grandfather and I would rake huge piles of leaves. And instead of disposing of them right away, we'd jump in them for hours. Just me and him, laughing until the sun went down. I listened, imagining him as a young boy, laughter pealing through the crisp air. That sounds wonderful, I said, my voice soft, touched by the tender nostalgia in his words. Later, as we sat on a bench overlooking a gently flowing river, I felt the peace of the evening wrap around us. The sky had deepened to a dusky purple, and stars were beginning to prick the canvas above us. I'm really glad we did this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I watched the water catch the last light of day. It's been a long time since I've felt this, connected with someone. He turned towards me, his expression earnest. Me too. It's rare to find someone who understands the silence as well as the words. I noticed the way the dying light played across his features, casting shadows that made his eyes appear even more profound. I felt a pull, an undeniable urge to lean closer, to bridge the gap of inches that suddenly seemed like miles. Can I tell you a secret? I murmured, leaning in so only he would hear. Of course, he replied, his voice low, encouraging. I hesitated, the words tangling in my heart before I could speak them. I'm a little afraid, I admitted, afraid of getting hurt again, but tonight, with you, it feels worth the risk. He reached out, his hand gently covering mine. I feel the same, he said, and in his eyes, I saw not just a reflection of my own fears, but also the promise of hope. I felt the warmth of his hand over mine, a quiet reassurance in the cool twilight air. The cafe had begun to empty, strings of little lights casting a soft glow over his face, illuminating his earnest expression. I've been waiting to hear that, I whispered, my heart thudding in my chest as though it were trying to reach out to him. You have no idea how much it means to me, he replied, his voice low and husky. I could see the faintest tremor in his touch, a vulnerability he seldom showed. I squeezed his hand, wanting to convey all that I felt without needing to find the right words. I think I do, I said, smiling slightly. Because I feel it too. I paused, the sense of a crossroads looming between us, potent and intimidating, yet filled with a strange sense of rightness. Where do we go from here? He considered this, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. Let's take it one day at a time, he suggested. See where this path leads us, together. I nodded, the simplicity of the plan soothing my overactive thoughts. I watched him across the table as we shared a dessert, his laughter more infectious than the live jazz playing softly in the background. I had always known there was a lightness to him, a playful side that he guarded carefully. Tonight, it seemed he had let that guard down just for me. My brother used to take me to a jazz club downtown, I said, a fond memory surfacing. But I think this place might just become my new favorite. Why is that? He asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. Because of the company, I answered, feeling a blush heat my cheeks. His smile widened, and I felt my heart swell with a joy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Do you often bring memories into the present? He inquired, his tone teasing yet thoughtful. Only the good ones, I replied. And only when I'm with someone who makes them better. He reached over, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Then let's make some good memories tonight. I stood with him outside the cafe, reluctant to end the evening. The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors around us, the sounds of nightlife a distant backdrop to the quiet intimacy we had woven around ourselves. I should probably get home, I murmured, although every fiber in me screamed to stay, to hold on to the moment. Let me walk you, he offered, and I nodded, grateful for the extra minutes together. As we strolled through the bustling streets, our hands found each other again, a comfortable, fitting interlock of fingers. I'm glad we did this, I said, squeezing his hand. I was nervous, you know. I was too, he admitted. But with you, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, comforting and desired. As we reached my building, I faced him, unwilling to break the connection. Thank you for tonight, for everything. He smiled, leaning in so close I could count the flecks of gold in his eyes. It's just the beginning, he promised, and his lips met mine in a kiss that sealed his vow, a perfect, lingering connection that spoke of tomorrow and all the days to come. I pulled away slightly, the cool autumn air mingling with the warmth of his breath. I looked into his eyes, still close enough to see the reflection of the fading sun in them. I have to admit, I was scared, I confessed. I thought that after everything, maybe we wouldn't find our way back here. He gently tucked a stray lock of my hair behind my ear. I knew we would, he said, his voice a soft murmur that seemed to dance with the rustling leaves around us. I believed in us, in you, even when things were at their darkest. I leaned my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I lost so much of myself in the past. I forgot who I was without you, I murmured. The confession weighed heavily on my chest, but it felt freeing, like releasing the breath I didn't know I was holding. You were never really without me, he replied, his words a soothing balm to my fears. I carried you here, he tapped gently on his heart, the whole time. I smiled up at him, my heart swelling with a mix of relief and love. And I carried you here, I placed my hand over my own heart, feeling the thrum of it beneath my fingers. Even when I was lost. He kissed me again, and I felt every promise we didn't have to speak settling between us like the golden leaves that carpeted the ground around our feet. I walked beside him, the crunch of leaves underfoot a testament to the season changing around us. I watched the way the late afternoon light filtered through the branches, casting long shadows that weaved into the fabric of the forest floor. Do you remember the first time we came here? I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet woods. Of course, he chuckled, you tripped over that root there, he pointed to a spot on the trail, and I was so worried you had hurt yourself. I laughed, the sound bouncing off the trees. And instead of helping me up, you fell right beside me because you were laughing too hard. He grinned, mischief flickering in his eyes. It was a strategic move to make you feel better. I shook my head, my laughter mingling with his. Well, it worked. I couldn't stop laughing even though my ankle was bruised. We continued walking, the silence comfortable, filled only with the sounds of the forest and our footsteps. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, the kind that came from knowing I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I think about those moments a lot, I said after a time. About how easily we could have lost them. He squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the fragility of our happiness. But we didn't, he said firmly. We're here now, and that's what matters. I stood at the edge of the clearing, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I watched as he gathered small sticks, building a fire in a pit surrounded by stones. The first spark caught, and soon a gentle fire was crackling before us, the warmth pushing away the evening chill. He sat beside me, his arm pulling me close. I rested my head on his shoulder, watching the flames dance and flicker. Do you think we can keep this? I whispered, almost afraid to disrupt the magic of the moment. This peace, this happiness? He turned to look at me, his gaze as intense as the fire before us. I think we can do anything, he said with conviction, as long as we're together. I let those words wash over me, sinking deep into my heart. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "I never want to lose this," I said, my voice steady despite the tears that threatened to spill over. "You won't," he promised, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." The fire crackled, a symphony of sparks that seemed to punctuate his promise. I leaned into him, my heart full, my fears slowly melting away like the last rays of the sun disappearing beyond the horizon. I sat close to the fire, feeling its warmth seep into my bones. I watched the flames dance, their orange tongues licking the cool evening air, casting shadows that played on his face. I noticed every line, every scar, every gentle curve that made up his expression. My heart seemed to swell, heavy with words I'd carried for too long. I turned my gaze towards the lake, where the moon's reflection shimmered like a path leading to another world. I felt him shift beside me, his shoulder brushing against mine in a silent promise of solidarity. "I never thought I'd find myself here again," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid to break the magic that hung between us like the stars in the sky. "I know what you mean," he replied, his voice deep and resonant against the crackling of the fire. "I've spent so many nights wondering if I'd ever feel peace like this again." I looked into his eyes, seeing the reflection of the fire flickering in them, and I felt a connection that tethered me to him in ways that words could never fully express. "I'm scared," I admitted, letting the truth spill from my lips like the wine from our glasses. "So am I," he said, reaching for my hand. "But I'm less scared with you." I woke up to the sound of birds chirping, their melodies weaving through the air of the early morning. I stretched, feeling the soft grass beneath me, dewy and cool against my skin. He was still sleeping, his face relaxed, a soft snore escaping him now and then. I smiled, watching the rise and fall of his chest, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. I got up quietly, not wanting to wake him, and walked towards the lake. The water was still, like glass, reflecting the pink and gold of the sunrise. I dipped my toes in, the cold biting my skin, and I shivered, not just from the chill but also from the realization of how much I had changed. I was no longer the woman who feared the unknown, who shrank from the idea of new beginnings. I was someone who embraced them, even if they came wrapped in uncertainty. As I turned back to the campsite, I saw him standing there, watching me. "Coffee?" he asked, holding up 2 mugs, steam rising from them like spirits in the dawn light. "Yes, please," I said, walking back to him, each step a solid affirmation of my choices. We packed up the campsite in comfortable silence, working together in an easy rhythm that felt both new and familiar. I rolled up the sleeping bags while he doused the fire, making sure every ember was out. I watched him work, his movements deliberate and careful, and I found myself thinking about the future, about all the mornings we might greet together. As we loaded the last of our gear into the car, he paused, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "What happens now?" he asked, uncertainty lacing his words. I took a deep breath, the forest air filling my lungs, grounding me. "We explore," I said, my hand finding his. "Together." He smiled, and it was like the sunrise, full of hope and new beginnings. We got into the car, and as he started the engine, I rolled down the windows, letting the wind catch my hair. I felt free, unburdened by the past, eager for the road ahead. With every mile we drove, I felt a chapter closing and a new one beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next, knowing I had found my way back to myself, and to him.